In a comment on a previous ETCS Nights Back, I was asked to look at packet 88, the level crossing packet. So here goes. Packet 88 was introduced in baseline 3, and this is in response to the fact that level, or sometimes called grade, crossings are a hazard on many railways. And there was a desire to use ETCS to provide better protection. Now, ideally, one would just interlock the movement authority with the operation of the level crossing protection system, so that if the level crossing is open to road traffic, trains cannot pass, and vice versa. ETCS has grown over time and has included a number of extra or non-core facilities, rather than just purely managing the safe speed and distance to go. And one of these functions is packet 88, the level crossing function. So let's start by having a look at where it is all documented. Well, we can turn to Chapter 3 of Subset 26, and in this instance I'm using version 360 of the specification, or Baseline 3 Release 2. And here it tells us that there is the potential for the ETCS onboard to be instructed by the trackside about various conditions for passing over a level crossing, and the fact that it will have an identity. That information is transmitted from the trackside using packet 88 as described in Chapter 7 of Subset 26, and we'll have a look at the structure of the packet in a moment. And then further on in Chapter 5 of Subset 26, we find the procedure for passing a non-protected level crossing, where it describes what should happen. And we need to read Chapter 5 and Chapter 3 together in order to understand what will be seen by the driver and what will be the behavior of the onboard. So packet 88 is quite a short packet, and it follows the standard format of packets that you should be familiar with. Let's have a look first at NID_LX. This is the identity number of the level crossing, and despite the fact it's called a NID_LX, it doesn't have to be a unique identity within the whole of a region or country. All it has to be is unique in the information which is currently stored in the onboard. The first 127 identities from 0 up to 126 are reserved for transmission other than by the RBC, so typically by a Belize group. The remaining identities, 127 to 255, are reserved for transmission by the RBC. If the onboard receives an identity of, say, 128 from a Belize group, then the normal behavior will be to reject the message as being not in accordance with the language, and this may lead to a trip or a service break intervention or other reaction. This does mean that once you have decided whether a level crossing is going to be managed using packet 88 sent by a Belize group or the RBC, you cannot mix the two together. The next piece of information of note is the distance from the reference of the message to the start of the level crossing, and of course that will be the LRBG. So the distance from the LRBG is normally to the edge of the roadway, but the trackside could be configured to transmit it to a distance on approach, perhaps where there is a marker board, not a stop marker, just an indication sign at the line side. Moving on, we find the length of the LX area. So this is going to be the extent over which the level crossing is considered to be unprotected and that action may be taken. And that is the distance from the end of the DLX to the start of the LX area to the end of that level crossing, and that would typically be the extent of the roadway. Normally when packet 88 is sent, it is going to be to tell the onboard that a level crossing is not protected, and QLX status will be set to indicate that. Packet 88 could then be sent again with the same NID_LX, and now with QLX status set to protected, in order to cancel the reaction that packet 88 would cause in the onboard. Alternatively, you might just send through a switchable balise the fact that the crossing is protected or not protected once and not update it subsequently. If the crossing has to be passed over in the unprotected state, then normally you'll want to restrict the speed to a speed where the driver can observe the crossing is clear, be prepared to stop short of an obstruction. VLX allows that speed to be defined in the same way as all other speeds in multiples of 5 kilometers per hour. You should note that the speed restriction only applies to the front of the train. Whilst it is not explicitly stated anywhere in the subsets that I could find, 3.13.7.2 of subset 26 lists those speeds for which the speed will be compensated for the train length when it is incorporated into the most restrictive speed profile, and VLX is not listed there, so we could assume that it will only ever apply to the front of the train. That makes sense. Now, the next two pieces of information are whether the train needs to stop on the approach to the level crossing before being able to proceed or not. Q stop LX allows the stop to be required, and if that stop is required, then the stop has to occur in a short distance before the start location of the level crossing. If the stop occurred too far from the crossing, then it would not be considered as a stop for the level crossing. L stop LX defines the distance on approach to the level crossing in which the stop must occur. So if the train receives a packet 88 stating that the level crossing is not protected, it will automatically apply an end of authority and supervised location at the start of the level crossing area, and it will start to supervise the train towards that stopping location. As far as the driver is concerned, it could be any normal end of authority. Once the train gets close to the level crossing, then the requirement to stop or not to stop becomes important. If the train is not required to stop, then when the train reaches the point where the braking curve, which is dominant, intersects the VLX, the speed for the crossing, then the end of authority and the supervised location are removed, and V_LX is incorporated into the speed profile, and the driver will see the movement authority effectively being extended to the movement authority that was transmitted. If the train is required to stop, then it must reach a standstill within that should be L stop LX, apologies for that, of the start of the level crossing, and then the end of authority SVL is removed, and again VLX applies. So what does the driver see? Well, if the crossing is not protected, then the start of the level crossing is treated as the end of authority and supervised location, and the displayed MA will end there. It will be shown in the planning area as ending, and there will be the relevant countdown distances around the speed gauge. Provided that the level crossing start is being supervised as the most restrictive displayed target, this is a little technicality in the specifications that if there are more than one target being supervised, then it is only the most restrictive one that has is used by the system. Then if there is the most restricted display target, then the icon will appear on the DMI to advise the driver they're approaching an unprotected level crossing. If a stop is required, once the driver has brought the train to a stand within the stopping window and approached the level crossing, the end of authority supervised location is deleted and the speed profile is updated to show level crossing speed and the full movement authority. And the level crossing not protected icon continues to be displayed to the driver till the front of the train has passed clear of the crossing. That's LX beyond the start of the crossing. If the stop is not required, then once the train has been supervised down to the speed of the level crossing and reached the point where the braking curve intersects the level crossing speed, then again the end of authority is deleted and the level crossing speed applies. And the driver will see the movement authority being updated in the planning area. So what happens if the level crossing is not protected? Well, here operational rules have to apply. In some instances, it could be because the crossing has failed. In other cases, it could be because the crossing allows road traffic to pass over it without gates or barriers. A number of different scenarios in each different country. However, typically the driver will be authorised to proceed by the signaller and dispatcher. So if we're going to implement this, how would we do it? Well, we can either use Belize messages or radio messages from the RBC, but remember we cannot mix them. On approach, if the level crossing is not protected, for whatever the national rules define, then we'd send the packet 88. And if we can detect that the level crossing is subsequently protected, then we could send packet 88 again, using the same NID-LX. So what are the limitations? Well, if the trackside can monitor the state of the level crossing in order to send packet 88 using radio messages, so that you can say the crossing is unprotected and then subsequently protected, you ask yourself, why not just interlock the level crossing with the movement authority? If you wish to send and cancel a protected level crossing state using Belize groups, then you're going to need switchable Belize's. And whichever way you do it, you're going to need to consider whether you need to duplicate the messages of Belize's, particularly the one to tell the onboard that the crossing is unprotected. So how useful is this packet? Well, it may have its uses where it's not possible to get information on the crossing back to the central interlocking. But remember that the use of Belize's is not trivial. We may be needing to control the messages within Belize groups 1,000 or 2,000 meters away from the crossing. The display of the icon may help the driver know why they're being stopped or slowed down. It may lead them to make some checks, but we have to be confident that the icon will always be displayed and displayed at the right time. If a temporary speed restriction is applied close to the level crossing, that might become the most restrictive target.